enable this presentation. We're all members of
Thank you,
Campaign to
Steve.
Close Rikers, and we're
Thank you,
here
Mr.
to
Palmer.
speak with you all. We know that you've had some presentations from the city, from their design team for the Bronx Borough Jail. So it is important that the city is doing what the city is doing. We are a grassroots campaign, led by people affected by Rikers and allies that have been working on this for years. So there's that sort of, how we relate to the city's presentations that what they're doing. And we're here to talk about both, sort of how this got started, what plan was approved in 2019, where we're at with progress on that, and what we propose as some next steps where we think this board's voice could be important. So again, I'm Sarita, Edwin, Anthony, and I will pass it over to Edwin to start us off, and we'll move through this piece.
Yeah. Would you like me to just continue sitting down, or
Yeah, whatever you feel comfortable.
is this okay? I mean, I'm usually standing up, but I don't.
Yeah.
Hi everybody. Now I feel stressed. So I'm here to give you like an overview of the campaign, right? So we're a coalition of survivors, right, of Rikers Island, like myself. I've been on Rikers Island, experienced Rikers Island, and we have up to date, we have over 190 organizations, faith leaders, service providers. We're all working to erase the stain on our city, right? So closing Rikers just doesn't mean closing the buildings, because a lot of people think just the buildings, once the buildings are closed, that's it, it just goes away. No, we're here, we actually moving people, and they think that just because they're moving people somewhere else, it's gonna be okay. But for us, it means like reducing the population, right? Reducing incarceration, defending the rights of people in New York City jails, and shrinking the Department of Corrections budget to invest in prevention. Move to the next slide. So a lot of people may not be aware of the 7 neighborhood study, but here in the South Bronx, Bronx was identified as one of the 7 neighborhoods way back in the day. I can't remember exactly what was the date, but as you see here, the study revealed that at the time, 85% of the state's prison and population was Black and Latino, and that the 75% of them came from 7 neighborhoods in New York City. All right, and this is going back past like the last 50 years. So this, even though this study had been done back in like, I think it was the 70s, maybe they revisited, as you can see, revisited back in the early 80s and stuff like that. But it still holds true today. A lot of those neighborhoods are still being affected, and they still fuel mass incarceration. Great. So Rikers is undermining both human rights and public safety. So that's why we need to close Rikers Island. We are told the legal system is supposed to be fair and operate on presumption of innocence. If you know that 85% of individuals on Rikers Island is innocent until proven guilty, because that's our system. That's our law. We are told the legal system is to be fair and operate on the presumption of innocence. We're told that incarceration is supposed to be for rehabilitation, and that it's supposed to keep us safe. But instead, of course, we know that what we are told from the criminal legal system, Rikers does the total opposite, right? It doesn't rehabilitate anybody, doesn't give anyone proper treatment, doesn't give anyone proper services that they need. So people are receiving a death sentence, basically, right, before they even go to trial, because it's a jail, not a prison. 2 different things. So 36 people have died since Mayor Adams took office. 36 people died since Mayor Adams took office, and that's very concerning. Next one. So these are some major reasons that we can just go over of why Rikers needs to close. When I was on Rikers, I'll be transparent, I was on Rikers, I'm formerly incarcerated. I did time on Rikers. I was also in prison, in state prison. So why close Rikers? It closed Rikers because it enables mass incarceration, right? It's built to isolate, not rehabilitate. When I was on Rikers, I always felt like I was in a different place, a different world, right? Like it was just like whatever happens there stays there. You know what I mean? Like you die, that's it. That's how I felt when I was there. Rikers doesn't address root causes of harm. You can go into Rikers Island poor, and they don't care. And as soon as it's time for you to leave, they'll just spit you back out. And it's like the same old thing, right? The same cycle. You go in the way you are, and nothing gets addressed. No root concerns get addressed. And then one of the major things is that enormous moral and financial costs goes on to families, goes on to the city, to people, to common people that just working. So that all hurts. That all hurts us. So yeah, instead we just have this. So these are one of the major concerns that we have when it comes to closing Rikers. I think the next one is for Anthony, and now I'm going to present up to Anthony to come up and thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Again, my name is Anthony Spurler. I'm a senior advocacy associate at Bronx Connect, which we're actually in the neighborhood over on 149th Street. Past a little bit away from you guys, from where you are now. What, as Edwin was mentioning, that my mother's husband was a correctional officer back in the 70s, and the same issues that he was mentioning here, he tells me it was happening back then. So this is a systemic issue that's been going on for a while. So we're going to talk a little bit about the impact on Rikers, specifically on Community Board 1. So we're looking at 391 people from the zip code, only zip codes of 10451, 54, and 55 were admitted to Rikers Island in 2021. Now that number is likely higher today because the number of people who are in Rikers today is higher. It costs approximately, the city approximately $53 million annually to put those people. The reason being is the cost per year for an individual is a little over $500,000, which is ridiculous when you look at it in comparison to how much it costs to put them in a program like Bronx Connect, which actually has success rates. We're looking at a lot of not-for-profits and a lot of not-for-profits who do this work who have success rates of not seeing recidivism. So the Black people from Bronx were admitted to jail at 8.9 times that rate of white people. Hispanics, people from the Bronx, admitted to jail 4.8 times that rate of white people. So we talk about the disparities, and this is really being able to see it in number form. We can go to the next. So what's the plan with Rikers? So when we're looking at the plan and that we're fighting for this coalition of a large number of organizations, the plan is to incarcerate, to shrink the New York City jail capacity to less than 3,500 people, and alternatives. As I just mentioned, the alternatives have been proven to work. Statistically, we're seeing less people going back to jail when they're in these programs. To close all 10 jails on Rikers Island and the boat by 2027. Right now, the law says 2027, Rikers needs to be shut down. To defend human rights, to replace the outdated jails that exist now in Brooklyn, Queens, and Manhattan and the Bronx with new facilities designed with human beings in mind. You've heard everyone talk about some of the conditions in Rikers. The plan with closing down Rikers and moving into this voluntary jail plan is to really alleviate some of that issue, and then invest and redistribute. 265 million in funds for community resources that was already agreed upon along with the law to close Rikers. We establish a commission for community reinvestment and closure of Rikers to guide investment of up to 1.8 billion per year that can be saved for closing Rikers. Really want to make sure that to ensure that the money that's being earmarked already is going to be invested correctly in order to help community. Okay, we can go to the next one. So, current Rikers population, a little over 7,000 people. Talked already about the goal to get it below 3,500. Why? Because we want to make sure that, first of all, that those that are in jail are actually fit to be in jail. We're looking at the racial disparities, which I talked about a little bit. Mental health. I want to highlight this a little bit because we're looking at over 50% of people who are actually in Rikers should not be in Rikers. They actually have some sort of mental health concern. They have mental health concern. Up to And that number has only increased in the past few years under the Adams administration. We're looking at 82% of people awaiting trial. As Edwin mentioned, this is jail, it's not prison. People there are really waiting to be sentenced, they're waiting for their court dates, so they're waiting trial. The average time in custody pre-trial is 269 days, which is horrible, especially if you're innocent. So this really keeps people who can't afford bail locked away in prison, increasing those numbers. For people who have received mental health services in jail, it's 312 days. So we're seeing part of the problem right now. I'm gonna pass it to Serena.
Okay, so I'll pick up with talking about, sort of where we're at in some of the other aspects of the plan. Anthony was talking about reducing the jail population, and to be clear about that aspect is not on track, but we have to and can get back on track with some of the strategies that we're talking about. There's also an infrastructure piece of this, right? That's the piece that the city has come to your board to present most directly about, I think, in terms of the borough jail, but that's part of a much bigger plan that we hope we're giving a fuller view on today. So in terms of the jails and the boroughs, they are being replaced, but too slowly. So every one of them, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, and Manhattan, are behind schedule. The closure date for Rikers Island is 2027, and you can see the completion dates are 2029, 2031, 2032. We do believe that the city can move faster on this construction, and that was affirmed this week last week, the Independent Rikers Commission that was convened by the Speaker did a sort of a wide-ranging study about how to advance this plan and affirm that they believe that they could do each of the buildings at least 1 year faster, if not even faster than that. The design of the replacement jails. So you've gotten a much more detailed presentation about this, and we won't go into all of that. But what we will say is that there are sort of our overall view here is that these are significant improvements from what exists on Rikers, not just in the location. Not being on Rikers is the first and most important step, but they're being designed with better program space, better access to medical care within the facilities, more space per person, better light. There are things that are significantly better than where we are starting from now. But there's also room to do better, and we'll talk. Those are some of the recommendations that we put within the draft letter that we shared with you all to make sure that we are really getting this right, and this design is going to maximize the kind of supportive environment that people can be in when they're incarcerated. So that is a rendering that they have right now of the Bronx design. So that's probably familiar to you, and we can go to the next slide. So one of the things that sorry to give you like a whole bunch of numbers on a chart, but I felt like it was important to be clear about this part because it's in the letter that we shared with you. So starting off, the city agreed to a system of 4 borough jails that would each have 886 beds. Under Mayor Adams, they did not take the steps that the city had agreed to reduce the jail population, and in fact, we're making policy and budget decisions that were sending the jail population up instead. And then based on that, the administration said, well, we don't think the borough jails were designed with enough capacity, so we want to increase the capacity. In our view, that was a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like they made policy decisions that weren't supportive of reducing incarceration, and then decided based on that they wanted to increase capacity in the borough jails. But they're limited to a certain height and square footage that was set by the agreement voted on in 2019. So they can't just add to the building. In order to add beds, they had to reduce the number of therapeutic beds. So that is a decision that we want them to reverse. We want them to go back to the original plan. That was 886 beds, and with about 40% of those therapeutic units. So that was 350. What they're working off of now is 1,040 beds. So they added about 150 beds, and they reduced the percentage of therapeutic beds to about 20%.
Can you explain to people what is a therapeutic bed versus a regular bed and who qualifies for a therapeutic bed?
Yeah. So right now, who qualifies for a therapeutic bed the basic qualifications are people diagnosed with a serious mental illness. But there are far more people on Rikers diagnosed with a serious mental illness than they have therapeutic beds for. So being diagnosed with a serious mental illness is a possibility of being placed in a therapeutic unit at Rikers, but not a guarantee.
And what is an example of a serious mental illness?
Bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, Yeah.
So regular depression, anxiety wouldn't count.
I don't believe so. No, I mean, a clinician should double check that for me, but
No, it
but
wouldn't
yeah.
count. I know it wouldn't
Okay,
count.
okay,
I
okay,
know
okay.
it wouldn't count.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Thank you. And what I wanted to say about the design of the therapeutic units. So the biggest difference is that the therapeutic units have a clinician space on the housing unit directly. And are staffed regularly by healthcare staff that are on the unit. In other units, in general population units, there's what exists on Rikers right now is that there's no healthcare space and people are like very distant from the clinic that they would need to get to. So the borough jails create a better design for it brings up the general level for the general population. So it is better. They would have a design where the housing unit would have at least an exam room, meaning that while healthcare staff wouldn't be working on the unit day in and day out they wouldn't be there on a regular basis like the officers. They would have a space so that when clinicians come to the unit, they have a space to meet with people privately. That doesn't exist on Rikers right now. And then general population units would be arranged around a cluster, and it would be per cluster about 3 or 4 housing units. Each of those would have a clinic. So people would have better access to a clinic even if they're in general population, but in a therapeutic unit, that presence is right there in the unit. So that is something that we think is important for people that have serious.
So, just so you can understand, Sharita, I think I may have been, besides our staff, the only person at the borough-based jail presentation, which was land use. Just, the talk was a little bit weird. We didn't realize how many people were coming in month, but, and I wanted to share that I was asked if you are prescribed any psychotropic meds, maybe antidepressant, anti-anxiety, regular medication. Do you qualify for therapeutic beds? And they said no. So you can be in general pop and then have to walk over to the nurse, whatever, and get your pills, but you'll still be in general pop. And so when these agreements were created, even though I'm so thrilled to hear that there's at least an exam room in the general population, but as you stated, there's 62% of people with some type of mental disorder, whether they're severe or not mental disorder. Why couldn't they be a clinician on general pop and therapeutic?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that there's 2 elements of that. There's the operational decision. So they could say, yeah, we're going to add healthcare staff, and that would be a good thing. The piece that they're deciding on right this moment that they won't be able to easily change is the infrastructure. And so that's why we are focusing on trying to restore the infrastructure for those therapeutic beds, because that means that if we can get the city to agree to more healthcare staffing, there'll be a space for those people to to have an office. So that's why in the letter that we provided, we're suggesting to urge the city to return to this original plan of 886 beds with 40% therapeutic, because that at least creates the infrastructure possibility to have the better setup, and then they do have to align the staffing with that. But what they're working off of now is a reduced proportion of therapeutic beds. I mean, it is. I would say that the design of the units is. I guess I mentioned this, and I do want to be clear about it. The design of the general population units does give people better access to healthcare, whether or not they're in a therapeutic unit, but we want the maximum amount of therapeutic units. That's sort of why we're advocating for returning to that original unit.
You talked about this though.
Wait, hold on. I want her to finish her presentation, and then we'll do
Okay, yes,
full,
we will. We'll do Q&A.
full. I just want to point
And I just wanted to, just like the rest of this, so this is generally the way the city is approaching the plan for all the other boroughs. You can see that they've proposed that increase across the other boroughs. Queens has a slight difference in that all the beds for women are in Queens. They're centralized in one jail. That was actually requested by advocates, formerly incarcerated women, who felt like it was important for there to be one space for women, that they would get better services there. And then there's also these separate outposts of therapeutic housing units. So they are jail units, but they're located at hospitals so that people with the most serious medical needs, maybe mental, potentially not mental, but just physical health needs, can be close to the specialty care that they need. So the example that comes to mind for me is one of our members whose son had leukemia and is being like, dragged back and forth from Rikers to receive his treatments at Bellevue. But, when these units are open, could be like in one of these units, just going down the hall for specialty care instead of being transferred like that. So that's kind of the bigger picture of the capacity. So we do want to talk about, the future of Rikers. So following up on the plan to close Rikers in 2019, the city passed a law in 2021 that designates Rikers Island for sustainability uses as the jails close. And I started to say after, and then I changed it to as, because I think this is important. What we wrote into the law is not just that we wait until all the jails are closed to start this transformation, but that the city should actually start transferring the land and the buildings as they become vacant every 6 months. So 2 transfers actually happened under the previous administration, 1 empty jail and then 40 acres of empty land. Under this administration, we've only seen them close 1 jail, and they have been unwilling to make that transfer permanent. So we're not seeing them moving forward on renewable Rikers as they could be or should be. But we have seen part of the law also required them to do 2 studies, one about wastewater, the possibility for wastewater treatment on Rikers and the possibility for renewable energy generation and storage. Both of those studies, done by technical experts, came back very positive and basically emphasized that this can and should be a really important solution to our city's climate justice goals, but also to removing harmful and toxic infrastructure from communities. So, in the South Bronx, wastewater treatment plants could be closed and we could relocate that infrastructure and build it better on Rikers Island, which is not in anyone's backyard. So we did want to mention that. We can go to the next slide. So I wanted to walk through these steps that we outlined in the letter that we provided to you all. We know that we want to see this plan move forward and also in the best possible way with the best outcomes for the city overall and for this community. So in conversation with some of the board members, we gathered some, we knew some of the things that were part of the original plan, gathered some additional suggestions from board members about what the board could suggest to the city about the steps that need to be taken to make sure that we're moving forward in the best way. So there's kind of 2 buckets of things, one that's about community investment and reducing incarceration, and then another bucket that's around design. So that's how we broke them up. So on the first one, the city absolutely must ensure that all the Bronx funding commitments in the points of agreement are fulfilled. It's a really long list, so I brought the list with me and we could talk through each point of it. I won't go through all that right now, but this basically was in 2019, when the city made this agreement on closing Rikers, they made commitments to make investments, to make renovations in overall citywide, and specifically the communities where the borough jails are being replaced. So that commitment included converting the old 40th precinct into a youth services center, and a number of other commitments that every one of them, must be fulfilled for this community. But that was just a start. So they should also make additional neighborhood investments recommended by the Bronx Neighborhood Advisory Committee. So the Bronx Neighborhood Advisory Committee was convened by the city from 2018 to about 2021. I think then they sort of stopped being active. And then under this new mayor, I think they've had at least 1 or 2 meetings. These are recommendations that Ramona's not here, but that Ramona, sent directly to us from the records that she had, that the Neighborhood Advisory Committee had recommended in addition to the original agreements. So we're talking about the original agreements and then some additional that are based on rehabilitating the underpass at 135th Street and Lincoln, establishing a small business kiosk space at 134th and Lincoln, and rehabilitating waterfront spaces at the end of Lincoln. And then our entire campaign, the Campaign to Close Rikers, is calling on the city to make additional investments to increase community safety and reduce incarceration. This year in the city budget, we're asking for $39.8 million, and that's really divided up among a few main things. 2 are related to community-based mental health treatment teams. So the city has a wait list of hundreds of people who have been approved to have a community-based mental health treatment team. So people with kind of the highest level of need who need someone to come to them rather than relying on them to get themselves to a clinic or whatever. And the city has services that work. They're called IMT and FACT teams. They've been proven to be very successful for people with mental health needs that also have unstable housing. But people sit on wait lists, waiting to get that service even after they've been approved. And honestly, sometimes in that time, they have a crisis and they may end up at Rikers. So we should fully fund those teams and make sure that waitlist is eliminated. We're also calling for investment in justice-involved supportive housing. So this is housing for people specifically designed to be focused on people returning from jail and prison that have a serious mental illness. The city agreed in 2019 to create 380 more units. We had 120 at that time. I am disappointed to tell you that we still have 120. They have not funded those additional 380, so we need to get that number up to 500 as they agreed to. And then there's a program called Crisis Respite Centers they're sort of an alternative to hospitalization for people who feel themselves maybe getting to the point of mental health crisis, but they're not there yet. And it's an option for people to have more agency to actually say, like, I actually need some time. Maybe I need a week, maybe I need a few days. It goes up to 14 days where people can be in this sort of crisis respite center. So the city passed a law, actually, they passed two at the same time. One was for clubhouses and one was for crisis respite centers, but it required the city to open 4 more. Certainly at least one of those should be in the Bronx, and potentially more, but these are another proven intervention that is just underfunded. And so for a city our size, we definitely need at least 4 more, and it's required by law. This city budget also proposes cuts to alternatives to incarceration and reentry services. So the exact programs that Anthony was talking about that are far more effective than Rikers and operate at like a 20th of the cost, the city is proposing funding cuts. That's unacceptable, especially given the commitment that we have, the requirement to close Rikers, the moral and legal commitment, moral and legal requirement to close Rikers. So we want to see those funds restored. So this is the set of recommendations that we're asking the community board to bring to the administration around community investment and reducing incarceration. And then we can go to the next slide, which is our last one, because I know we'll want to have discussion around design. So we are urging the city to revert to the original 886 beds planned for the Bronx jail rather than 1,040, and restore the percentage of therapeutic beds to 40%. So that would bring that number back up to 350. We want to ensure that true outdoor space exists in the facility, including rooftop recreation space. So a little bit of context here is that we were careful in 2019 to make sure that there were some higher minimum standards requirements for the new borough jails that would give people, a better environment. And one of the things that there is required is a recreation space on each housing unit. So that is part of the design, but it's an enclosed, kind of like a half basketball court space. It is open air, so that's good, and it enables people to be able to have access to recreation whether or not a correction officer is there to bring you. So it kind of like gives people a little bit more freedom of movement than exists right now at Rikers. But it's not fully outdoors. It's an enclosed space with some air coming in. So we do want to make sure there's actual recreation, outdoor recreation space wherever possible. What we've discussed with the city most recently is that the best possibility for that in the Bronx might be, if you've seen and you will see again, I guess again on Thursday in the design, there's sort of a kind of a platform area that's the first 3 floors, and then there's the tiers that are the housing. So the platform area has more of like the general services spaces, including the gym that will be for use by everybody in the jail. That gym has a roof over it that's not covered by anything because it's like the way the building is that the gym has a flat roof on top of it. So that would be a potential to create like a retractable roof that actually gives people open air space. It's a city, right? So it's difficult. It's not we're not going to have like huge areas of outdoor grass, but everything that can be done needs to be done to make sure that people have real recreation space. We want the city to expedite the completion of the facility to align with the legal closure date. Again, like they're planning for completion in 2031, but the closure date for Rikers is 2027. Even if they don't get it done fully by 2027, they need to do everything possible to get us close to that date. And the indications we have so far is that they could be moving significantly faster. And we want the city to be advancing the Renewable Rikers plan with the priority placed on closing polluting infrastructure in the Bronx. So as the city is looking at the potential to move some of this infrastructure to Rikers, that wastewater treatment, the energy generation storage, that means that they get to look at the whole city and say like, well, where do the old power plants, wastewater plants exist that could be closed and moved? And we think that as they're doing that, the priority should be on communities that have been most impacted by mass incarceration and environmental racism, and that is the South Bronx. So we definitely think that as the city moves forward with this, they should not just be moving the whole renewable Rikers plan forward, but also thinking specifically about how to close polluting infrastructure in the Bronx. So now we're eager to hear what questions you have, what thoughts you have. We know that we shared a lot with you.
Yeah.
And,
Can you go back to the ask and then just click, the
Points.
the
Points of
points
agreement.
only, so, yeah, because so everybody can be on the same place. I don't think a lot of people know about the, no, not that one, go back.
The next one.
Yes, points of agreements.
Yes.
So there's some hyperlinks that I think need to be delineated on, so people can read them.
Thank you. And so this is the city's website where they're tracking those points of agreement. It's like, there's kind of a lot there. So I printed out one hard copy if folks want to pass this around and just see what's there. This is something where, like, we really want to be in collaboration with you all to understand what have they done and not done. Because, for example, I mentioned justice involved supportive housing, that they were supposed to create 380 more units. So what it says on the city's website right now is that they released a request for proposals for 380 more units, and they did. But they set the funding rate for that so low, it's lower than like every other supportive housing program, which doesn't make sense because it's a higher need population. So they set the funding so low that nobody has applied. So those 380 units don't exist. So, I say that to say what is on this website may or may not be the full story. And that's why, like, as people that live in the community, we want to know, like, did they actually repair that playground? Did they do that lighting?
I do want to just note two things and then open the questions for the people in the room, starting first with the board members. So there are some things that I think are going to be complicated based on like community. And so, for example, supportive housing is something we as an independent person and public defender believes in, but we do feel like our community is oversaturated with supportive housing and shelters and transitional housing, right? They do think that it's super overwhelming and then takes a burden to the quality of life in the neighborhood. So I think Fortune came to our board maybe a few months ago, or maybe transitional housing, they didn't really let us support, they had it by right. But that did feel upsetting to the community because like they are harboring the brunt of the city's total needs. And so I did want to say that, and I think they would probably feel the same way about the crisis respite outreach center. So I think a lot of time advocates talk about these things that we know are really effective, but then they get placed, maybe because the price is so low, I don't know, but they get placed in the same community that is, bearing the brunt of a lot of poverty and symptoms of poverty. And so, I just know people have good feelings about that, and I want to make sure that the advocates know that, because people sometimes you guys are advocating for things you don't know where they're placed.
But no, I really appreciate that. And what I would say about that point is what this letter suggests is that the city should follow through on that commitment as a citywide commitment, not that it be in Community Board 1, but that these 380 units of supportive housing that the city has promised for people returning from jail and prison, they should be somewhere. They shouldn't be nowhere, which is where they are now. That is the point that you made about cost is a really important one, because part of what we've been doing in advocating for sufficient funding for this program is to make sure that the program can be placed in different locations throughout the city, not just one. I mean, I'll be transparent. I live in East New York. We are the other neighborhood that has a low enough housing cost that's where housing is. I also know that a lot of my neighbors have been to jail and prison. So like I think that on the one hand, we've got a lot of people coming home and we need spaces for them to live. and on the other hand, like every community should do its part. In terms of placement of supportive housing and respite centers. So in your consideration of that particular point, I would say that what we would understand the community board to be supporting if you chose to would be that housing and that respite center, they should exist in the city overall, not necessarily this.
Any questions from board members?
We being bamboozled.
No, talk about it, my brother.
Nelson Rockefeller, when he was governor, he closed down all the state mental hospitals, then he enacted the Rockefeller drug laws. He also studied the situation. I remember the articles back then, you know that drug addiction is a mental illness. And the prison industrial complex, which is essential to the military industrial complex, is big business.
Right.
It would cost $100 a day to keep an inmate a bed.
Okay.
That's $36,500 a year. That's college tuition right there. It costs the city of New York close to $160,000 a year to keep a youngster age 16 and under inside their prison system until they're convicted.
Absolutely.
Now, I'm a former school board member of Board 7. And this city and this state knows when a child starts failing in the 3rd grade, the money is taken out of the public education system and put in the prison system.
Right.
You got 2 states in the United States where it's mandated, state law, that when a child does fail in 3rd grade, that money gets taken out of the public school system and put in the prison system. California is one of those states. I can't remember the other state off the top of my head.
Okay.
But I do know in Board 7, a whole lot of people don't know that Rikers Island is part of Bronx County. And then when they carry that youth place out there, Board 7 has to include that in the budget and send the teachers out there and educate them youngsters out there. And as far as the women's component, I remember when the women's component was in Manhattan, there was no females on NYPD. The only way a female could get into law enforcement was to become a matron at the women's prison system, women's jailhouse. And I remember reading an article about the Bronx House of Detention when over in 1927 down the block over there. The article says straight up that the Bronx House of Detention is a boon to Bronx County for economic development, which is nonsense. Because Sing Sing opened up in 1827, the first penitentiary in New York State, same year slavery ended. Sing Sing is still open.
Thank
All right, hold up. I'm
serious about this. This is about money.
I'm trying to follow. I'm trying to follow.
Okay, Sing Sing is still open.
No, listen, I'm trying to follow you, right? Because I'm trying to see your point. I understand you saying a lot of good stuff, but I don't see your point.
Well, see, my point is this: if they're gonna put a jail over here in Bronx, they need to put it on top of the courthouse. Because to me, it makes all the sense in the world. Why are you gonna put it over there and have the buses?
All right, so the reason why, that's a good question, legitimate question. Thank you for that question.
Yeah.
Appreciate that question. Legitimate question. The reason why is because the old structure wasn't, so they couldn't actually build on that old structure, right?
Uh-huh.
That's why they did it, it's like 10 minutes away in my Haven. And that's the reason why they chose that spot, because it was just another spot in the Bronx. Like I said, the plan of the city, they had to put it somewhere around here. So that's why they chose that, because it wasn't able to put it right by the courts, like the other jails there's gonna be and how the old jail used to be. That's the only reason why it's there. But I spoke with the design, and one of my concerns, my wholehearted concern is that the travel between Rikers Island and the Bronx jail is hell, right? Through any borough, right? It's hell. Being shackled down, being in a cell, that whole time is hell, right? So now I asked them, what's the time period between the new Bronx jail and the courthouse? And it was like no more than like 10 minutes, maybe tops, right? Depending on a little bit of traffic. But they always go out early in the morning time because they want to beat that traffic, right? So it's not going to be too much traffic. And they seen it on the map, and was kind of like, for me, it was acceptable. You understand what I'm saying? Like the weight travel and everything going from the Bronx jail and there. So that's the answer to that question.
Mr. Francis, I will get back to you. I promise we will get back to you. Does anybody else have any questions?
I'm sorry I didn't fully introduce myself, but I'm the senior advisor for New York City and Downstate Justice Initiative for the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services. And thank you for your presentation. I know you mentioned about the bus route. Is there a specific bus route that they already designed that they won't go through?
Yeah, it's I don't know the specific design, I can't tell you like they're gonna go this way, but he did mention there's a way that they're gonna continuously go from the jail to 161st and courthouse. So there is
Seems like the easiest way would be Bruckner all the way to.
Probably, yeah, that's right, because it's just like it's right there by the highway, so it's gonna be right there by the highway, so I figured they're gonna utilize the highway, yeah. So I saw it's not a really big. Yeah, it's
So-
not like a really crazy route.
Is there a plan, existing plan that they're not allowed to go through neighborhoods unless it's an emergency, or that's not?
Talking about
included?
the buses, the
Yeah.
correction buses,
Yeah.
if there isn't a route to go through?
Yes. Only because of the asthma population that we have in the South Bronx and adding those trucks are really big and they're diesel and they're just making, you know.
Well, they
pollution
pass through I mean, those buses pass through the city every single day. With or without being on, whether you see it or not, they pass by here all the time,
To the neighborhood.
through the neighborhood.
Unfortunately,
that's more of a city-
they are making those
It
trips
goes
now.
downtown
Jail
for us,
question.
Yeah, and right now, those trips are coming, people would be coming from Rikers Island or from the boat, that's like off of Hunts Point to the Bronx courthouse. So overall, I think regardless of whatever route they take, it would be a reduction. But I think your point is an important one, relative, like the air quality in the neighborhood is important. And it makes sense to take the route that is like both fast. It's like, you're not gonna drive people all over the Bronx to get to their
Yeah.
court date, right? Like, that's both like efficient and that limits any kind of negative exposure to pollution.
But I do want to say, right, see, the plan to close Riker doesn't have anything to do with like, how DOC is gonna be running the services, like the safety, security. But that's a good question to ask them, like, are you gonna change the buses, you know what I'm saying? Like, are you gonna make it, we in the clean, energy era, right? So, are you gonna, try to change over to clean air with some good buses? Because those buses are very, very
That-
inhumane.
That is something that was in the points of agreement. There was so much there that I didn't print it all out, but there was something related to DOC changing its fleet over to clean buses. The ones that run on ones that are most fuel efficient. And I know that were and electric that I think that they did respond to. But something that I did want to just mention related to what Edwin said, because I think you'll have a presentation for the full board on Thursday from the city where they can answer some more of the technical aspects of like how are they going to run their bus routes. So we don't work with the Department of Correction. We don't make some of those determinations, but it is really important for our campaign to be doing that ongoing work about talking about how the department's going to operate differently and on figuring out how we legislate that, what agreements we get around that. But that sort of, I would name that in the category of like ongoing work, because the truth is when the city passed the plan to post Rikers, getting just the amount of stuff that we told you, getting agreement on that was a lot. And it was a lot to pack into one plan. What was not included in that plan substantially was an overhaul of the department itself. That is the remaining work. So the city on paper committed to continuing to convene these like culture change working groups. They have not done that under this administration. And in fact, they've rolled back some efforts around like transparency. But what advocates have been able to do, for example, is that we were part of a coalition that pushed the city council to pass a ban on solitary confinement. So there's the things that I think some of the most important pieces that we can work on now where I'll be transparent, an administration that's not really interested in reforming the department, but we can legislate to limit their worst abuses. So that's where we've been like focused right now while we see when we can start to get, agreement from an administration that actually wants to talk through like how do we restructure this department.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions?
Yes, I'm curious, can you talk a little bit more about the respite centers and like kind of like what they do and how they operate?
Yeah, so the number in the city has ebbed and flowed a little bit. So I know at one time, I would say there's probably about 4 to 8 operating citywide right now. And they are a place where you have to be referred by by a clinician of some sort. I don't know off the top of my head, like who are the people, I believe like doctors, but also nurse practitioners and social workers can refer people. You can't at this moment sign yourself in, but I think there's like some consideration of if people could just, sign themselves in themselves. But they're used to give people like kind of like a mental health respite when they feel like they need some kind of higher level of mental health care. If they're in the community, they're maybe someone who has ongoing mental health needs and they feel like they might be getting to a crisis point. So people can go there and get a little bit of a break, get some more intensive mental health treatment, be outside of their own space, but not have to get to the point of having a crisis on the street and being hospitalized. So it's a really good like preventative program. There's just like not that much capacity. And it's both capacity and accessibility. So you're not gonna, when people are in that moment of feeling like they need that care, the further away it is, the less likely you are to pursue it, right? So having things that are like proximate to people throughout the city is important, as well as having enough capacity. And people can stay generally for, I believe it's up to 14 days. I think there was some consideration in some of the sites of changing it to 28 days at most, but like, it's a short-term stay. And then actually one of our members uses them a lot. Like he'll just sort of like be gone for a week and like get some support and then be back and able to like be home and doing well. So I think they're an important kind of an important part of our mental health system that I think people don't know a lot about.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, like you said, like a preventative thing, man. Like, I mean, who that's what we're trying to fight for. We're trying to fight for not just for individuals that's actually in the system. We're trying to prevent people from going in there too. That's part of the decarceration, So anything that can prevent someone to have a crisis when they have mental health concerns, some dire mental health concerns, everybody should stand behind that.
Yeah.
I was also curious with the infrastructure a little bit of the new design, and you said it's a little bit better. What of this new design, like, do you think is like better than, initially?
So I experienced what it is to be on Rikers Island and to go to medical on Rikers Island and to go to the dentist and go to my counselor and to go to the gym and go to the education. So I went through all that stuff, and it's a headache to get to any one of those things, right? I mean, talking about literally and physically, because if the officer doesn't want to have you go, he'll just bust you in the head and say no. But anyway, I digress. So in these new jails, and how I've been very how can I say, like, I've been very attentive and being attentive in attendance when it comes to these design sessions, because I want to know what's the structure of it, right? How are people going to, the daily rec room, they call it, right? Where people just going to hang out, because you go to court, but then when you're going to happen when you're on in the housing unit. So those housing units are kind of like interconnected, right? They have like the council. I've seen some of them have like the counselor area where the counselors can come see you. The rec area is a little bit more comfortable, right? It's not like I know we're in a hospital, but not a hospital in a sense, how can I, you understand when I say that? How can you call that, man? When like less therapeutic than what it is today. They have a lot more access to like the gym. When people want to go to the gym, it's faster to get down there to get to the gym. It's faster to get to their programs. So everything's much quicker, right? So you don't have to rely on an officer to walk you 20 minutes away to another house or something like that, another building or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's like an elevator ride sometimes, the steps, and you're like right there. So a lot of that I feel a lot of that is good, and a lot of that is came from individuals like myself who have experienced Rikers and have came to those design meetings and say, hey, listen, I think this should happen, this should happen, this should happen. And these architects are really kind of cool and kind of like taking our ideas and bringing it together and making those housing units more accessible when it comes to like moving around, right? So safety is good. Safety is absolutely a number one priority. But as far as individuals living on the housing units and trying to travel one way to another, it's very simple and very easy.
And if I could add like one thing to that, I think to understand why they're significantly better, it helps to understand like what the units at Rikers are like now. So picture a housing unit, either it's got like cells around the outside with like a middle like day room area, or it's a dorm that has like a day room area adjacent to it. But it's just the day room. And so if you want to watch TV or like play cards or work on your case or try to be in a group session or have a counseling, there's just one room. There's like nowhere to be. And so, what the design that they're working on, like part of the reason that it requires some more space is that they've got a setup that has on the housing unit it's got a classroom space, it's got a program space, it's got a counseling space, so that like people can access those things without having to, you know, the way it is on Rikers, you have to get like trek to some other whole part of the island. So it's like Rikers is so bad that almost anything would be an improvement, but then there's significantly more that we've been trying to aim for with, you know, with what they're doing. We're pretty happy with some of the things we've seen in the design. There's more that we're asking for in terms of outdoor space especially. But some of the things are small, like we asked them during the design process, like there has to be a light in everyone's room so that you can control your own light, so that it's, when lights off at
Something
night,
as simple
you
as
can
that.
like, maybe you're working on your case, you can like,
It's
you know,
difficult.
that kind of stuff.
So getting to that, what, I'm sorry.
Yeah, just only so I can honor everyone's time.
Yes.
Sorry. The jail population currently 7,000 people. Even, I think this brings it up, even if they go with 1,040, that brings the total beds to 4,423 people. That still doesn't fit the current population. And I understand that, you know, mayors change by the time this thing is gonna end, but there is an honest conversation about we're at 7,000 and they're looking at 4,500. And I do think there is a conversation I can say from my community board about, you know, bail reform. There's all these people in the street. There's all these like, people feel like people are cycling in and out of the system. And I do think sometimes there is a push for these people should be in jail. You know, I need to be honest. I hold on. I need to make sure that I am representing the position of the various people who live in the residence. Okay, when they see low-income people who are severely maybe intoxicated, mental illness, who knows, just visible representation of people, there is a concern that right now 7,000 people are in jail. I feel like there are members of the community who feel like there are more people on the street who probably should be in jail or removed from the street, right? We understand that people think jail is a way to get you out of my face, okay?
It is, that's what
And so I do not understand how the plan is to get 7,000 reduced to 4,500 and members of the community feel safe.
I think Serena could best talk about it, but I wanted to hit one point real quick. So I understand that, right? Because we talk to the community. I'm a community organizer. I go to all communities. I've had some really tough conversations, and I've had that conversation, right? And it boils down to this. It's like bail reform works, right? Bail reform works. A lot of these laws that are in place works. The problem is that these judges and these DAs do what they want to do, right? And then if bail reform, if somebody comes in front of a judge and bail reform says let them go, whatever case may be, right? There's nothing to catch them outside. So you're cycling people in the same way. So then they say, oh, he was poor, no services, we're gonna release him, poor, no services. And then they say, look, the system don't work, bail reform doesn't work. So that's why we do a lot of our work. We try to fight and push on the budget, right? Why you fueling, or why you giving money to Rikers Island and trying to reform Rikers Island, when I'm 48 years old, I probably lived over at least 7 mayors, and they all try to throw money at Rikers Island, and it has all failed, right? So then why, instead of doing that, investing in that, throwing money at that every year, why you don't invest in money in stuff that's going to really help people, right? And preventative, like we just talked about, or something that's going to help them more when they go into Rikers, right? You want these people off the street, give them real services, right? You take them off the street, put them on Rikers, they're going to come right back out and go right to the street. You understand what I'm saying? So that's the importance of us fighting for a budget to go up for the city to invest in real services, not.
So I hear you,
offices.
I not to cut you off, I do want you to make sure, and I know Sarita, you wanna jump in there, but I just wanna make sure that when advocates are framing issues, that you guys are fully attentive to the needs of the community and where they are, that's where they are, and the things they don't understand. So when we talk about the real services, I think that needs to be a lot more specific. Some people feel like we also feel within the community overwhelmed with a variety of services that everyone doesn't feel always works, you know? Variety is, you're in New York, South Bronx, we have a variety. Some people, I think the quote can be up to 20 drug treatment facilities. Some of them may have Some of them may have a combination of also mental health treatment, and there is this feeling, right? Whether feelings are facts is another thing, but there's a feeling that they're not effective, that they're not working because there are still people on the street.
Sure. I'm sorry. Perfect, right? I'm
Yeah.
sorry for cutting you off. Perfect, right? That's perfect. People should feel like that. So if they feel that that don't work, give us something else. Because the money is there. The money, we're trying to save money. We're trying to invest money, right? We're trying to save money from this mass incarceration tool and invest in something else. So if the community feels that this doesn't, like whatever, services don't work, okay, what services do?
So I'm gonna just put one more question on the floor so the record can, I know I'm not in court, but like, so, the answers can be clear. And give this to Rita. This is obviously our, Health and Human Services person. I do not think the community, and we've talked to a lot, of, at least drug treatment providers, okay? And I don't think the community knows what services work, know how effective those services are, understand the gaps of funding issues. Maybe the services could be even better, but maybe they're shy $5 million. You know what I mean? So we just feel like the community just feels like they see people. They don't really know who's the person that's not working, and they feel. And I'm a public defender, and I know the feeling is wrong, but they feel, and I want to honor feelings, that things are not working. So when you guys are talking about this number, $39.8 million, you guys as advocates, you guys as formerly incarcerated people, need to inform the community what works, what doesn't work. I have heard so much about Clubhouse in the last few months, you know what I mean? And keep people informed, because I think that's the thing. We sign off for $39.8 million. Some people might vote no, because if it's going to be another failed attempt, then.
Well, and that's what we're here to do. So I'm glad you're asking. I do have the detail on that 39.8 million. There was like only so much I could throw at you all at once. So I can pass this around too. And we can, we'll send this all by. The link was in what we sent, but we can send up more. But I do want to say about the the attention to quality programs is really important. And one of the biggest drivers of lower quality programs is just like the funding levels set to fail, where you have constant turnover, right? Like if you cannot keep people that then continue to work with people over time, and it's a cycle. So that's something that we are trying to address by seeing adequate funding for these programs. And we all know, it's not rocket science. You fund something like you want it to work. You think about what would you need to pay people to have them stay? What are the wraparound services that need to be there? There's a lot of programs that have been underfunded, so people have seen a lot of things fail, and that's a real. I think people sense that things aren't working. They're right, because we live in the right now where the city is spending $500,000 for people to be on Rikers, and they're trying to cut funding to people that are running programs that are despite the city's best, efforts to undermine them, having success in alternatives to incarceration, but they're doing that for $8,000 a year, So there are we did try, in this summary that we have, to outline some of the programs that are working. There's also so much more that we could say about what is working. Bronx Connect could tell you stories for days. They were part of a report just recently about alternatives to incarceration and reentry programs, really based in people's success stories about what is working to have a non-jail response that really works and keeps us, in fact, much safer. But I do want to that is a conversation we're absolutely open to having with people. Before I pass to Anthony, I just did want to say that the speaker convened a commission called the Independent Rikers Commission. So Judge Littman, former Chief Judge of New York State, this commission convened once before, 2016 to 2017, and came up with recommendations under Speaker Melissa Martha Garrido. Then Speaker Adams convened them again with a kind of some new members of the commission, some of the older members as well. It was a pretty broad group of people, including people that I would have to say they're definitely not seen as advocates. They're not the people going around trying to close jails. They're not necessarily us. But people that are kind of public safety, focus on public safety and different kinds of community efforts. And they just recently released a report that affirmed that they definitely believe that the city can reduce the number of people in jail to less than 4,500. because the jail population right now is inflated by a lack of mental health services and a lack of housing to go along with that. Like that's driving the mental health incarceration. And it's also inflated by extremely long lengths of stay. So there's a lot that the court system can do and actually has started to do. So like one little glimmer of hope I've been transparent with you all that we don't feel the administration has been helpful to this plan, the city administration. The chief judge of New York State, thankfully, seems to have some concern around case delays and wanting to like deal with that. So we have seen an effort from the Office of Court Administration to work on to address case delays, so that that's something that can address the jail population. But sort of an independent panel of people with some pretty wide range of opinions came together over the course of more than a year and just put out a report that affirmed that they believe we definitely can bring the jail population under 4,500. What was part of their report was that that was based on kind of medium level implementation of some of the changes that they're talking about. If they looked at the strongest version of that implementation, they thought the jail population could be lower, which is why we feel confident saying that we think we could get it, that we could bring that number down even lower.
I'll just add on to this quickly, to that, and they hit on a lot of good points. We right now are in the place where we know things are not working as is. We already know that in Rikers, there's a federal monitor that's in there talking about how Rikers is run. And since they've been running those reports, they've said that Rikers has been mismanaged. So we're looking at money that's being wasted towards the city looking at the mismanagement. We already know that there are no large number of nonprofits like ours, like our rates are like 90-something% for young people who come into our program and complete our program. They don't go back to jail. They're not recidivating. Why? Because we're providing things, like someone said, we're helping them to connect with housing, with jobs, things like that that are needed. And what we're finding is that they're becoming productive members of society. So when we're looking at how to solve this problem, it's really looking at how do we wrap around? How do we, when we look really at this, even at the pure violence model that was put out there a number of years ago. It was put out there because it was seen to have worked in Chicago, all over here, and this model really just providing services was something that uplifted the community, begin to bring that down, begin to bring those numbers, those specific visible numbers. We're looking at areas where the funding is provided, shootings are going down. So it's really a thing of looking at those things that work and then saying, let's make sure we fully fund them. Our ATI programs are constantly fighting for programs within the city and within the state to say, hey, we really need to be funded at a good level to be able to provide adequate services. So Sabine was mentioning when you're talking about really losing good people because we're not able to pay what they should be getting. That's a real issue and that's a real concern. But when you're talking to the everyday person, yes, they don't know these things because we're fighting against a narrative that's out there. We're fighting against people who have maybe a bigger platform that say things like, if you're in Rikers, then you must have done something really, really bad. When the reality is you can be in Rikers just because you don't have a place to go back to. You could be in Rikers because you have a mental health concern. But the narrative that's out there is that we're making the city better, but we see people going into Rikers, having extra long stays and coming back out worse than when they went in.
Total.
I'm sorry.
No worries. I just want to make sure, is there any other questions? Okay, I just wanted, because I know there's going to be a letter to be voted on, I just wanted to just kind of tell you just some modifications that I would potentially put in the letter. And that is, currently, the mental health providers are completely insufficient to me. I was at the design. I asked them how many staff it's going to be from a correction hospital. They didn't have a number for that. I asked them how many correctional hospital staff they have in general. They didn't have a number for that. I believe, and I think I've heard Adrian, our speaker, everybody knows there's a lot of people with mental health, even if you can't, there's not enough therapeutic beds, there'll probably never be enough therapeutic beds, but there should be mental health providers, staff, even in general population. at all times. I agree with everything, that you said. We noticed in the design, there's supposed to be a community center, like a community provider on the first floor. I think no one should walk out poor and empty-handed the way they walked in. And so I don't know if there's a discussion on who's gonna be working on that first floor and if that provider's gonna be there 24 hours. I do want to tell you, our community members were concerned about people just walking out freely with nothing. That kind of scared me, to even think about that. But I think there'd be more safety around the borough-based jails if they need that at all hours. That provider is gonna be there to provide whoever's being released with a bus pass, with referrals. Do you want someone to drive you to Bellevue? Do you, it's late. No offense, it's not that much public transportation, great at location. And so, there's a specific ask about who is gonna be that provider, and that provider be staffed 24 hours, obviously making sure that everyone, whatever nonprofit is staffed at a livable, adequate funding to do that work. And I think that you guys do a push that there's supposed to be 990, I would tell on my community, 990 or 900 correctional officers in the borough-based jail in the Bronx. I hate that number. I told Sarita, I think that should be 450 correctional officers, 450 behavioral specialists. Like it's New York City, we can find the staff. So those are some of the things. I hope you send us the points of agreement and all the hyperlinks. I think those are important. I know you only printed out one copy. I think the board is gonna wanna know what they are because I don't think everyone has the same set of information. And I know our office staff can make sure that it's sent out to our members in advance, so people can be on the same page when there's a run through. Obviously, it's not like on Thursday, it's gonna be very, very brief, but at least people will be equipped with the papers. And I think I tried to frame what a lot of our board members are gonna start saying at that meeting. And I wanna thank you guys for coming and thank you guys for advocating in what can sometimes be very complicated terrain. And I think your presentation was really good. Sorry if I was tough.
No, that's good.
Okay,
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
We wanted to have a conversation and we appreciate you also representing even views that are not your own that you think are gonna come up, so.
Yeah.
I did wanna ask just like a question about process, so I don't know if you wanted to like draft in,
Yeah, I
what
will
you wanted,
add-
or if you wanted me to do that.
Yeah, I can, I'm so bad. If you can try, it'd be great, because then Steven's gonna text me about a letter that I'm gonna be
Yeah.
like, oh, I didn't get to. So
I
if you,
can, so a point about staffing seems like a thing
yeah,
that's on
correctional
Adam.
hub staffing,
Yeah.
yeah, correctional hospital staffing is really important. I know you put some hyperlinks in there.
I wanted to say
Yeah,
something that you had. I wanted to touch
And
on
also the
something.
provider on the first floor, 24 hour, that nonprofit that's supposed to live on the first floor.
Mhm.
That provider to be available 24 hours because people are released at all types of hours, and that person, whoever that provider is, to be able to give Metro card. I know Rikers gives Metro cards when you walk out. I know that, but just referral services to shelters and things of that nature.
Mhm.
So you didn't walk in empty-handed. You walk in with some support. And I think we can keep this one paper, right?
Yeah, that's
Uh,
Oh,
that was-
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that, what I will, the online version, I was just sort of copying from that because, there's not like a printed form of that. So I think what I will do, what I'll send you is that, I'll send you like what I copied from that so that it's just easy to email to people in your document.
Yeah, because we do
Or print
have
for people.
a public housing committee, and
Okay.
Danny Barbara, which is the chair of that, is also the NYCHA citywide person, and he could kind of tell us a little bit more if some of this actually happened. I don't think we're versed enough to know, because I see a lot of things in here are about public housing, and I think Danny would be more informed to know if some of these renovations actually happen, or could make a call and know who to call to see if these renovations happen, and that could then at least, we could send him something like this,
Yeah.
and he could go through that and figure out from his regional meetings about whether these things are actually happening.
That sounds great. I'll send you a PDF of that and of the breakdown of the 39.8.
Yes, that would be really, really helpful, and we are going to be very clear that we support these supportive crisis center, but we do not want them to be in community board one, which already is holding the jail and, other services, so that all the, that the city holds its fair share for, the community we have to this community. Any other questions? No, okay, so it's 7:13 and I will be, adjourning this, oh, can someone make a motion? Sorry, I'm so sorry.
I'll make a motion
To,
to adjourn.
adjourn, can someone second the motion?
second.
Okay,
Second.
and Rosanna. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. I'll let Lana come over.